Hello, everyone. Hope you are well. Just setting up the stream here, heading over to Zoom. All right. Today, I'm excited to be here talking with you. My name is Marte Siebenhar. I'm a classically trained professional musician, also a strategic planner. My business is Cultured Innovations, and I am a coach and consultant who helps creatives, business people, and artists be successful on purpose. I did something a little different today. I wrote out a script to be very organized. And this, what we're doing right now, is practical creativity. This is a live stream where we unpack what creativity is and how it works. So by hearing how people are using it, just orienting myself for Instagram here. By hearing how people are using creativity and what's working for them, we demystify the creative process so you can actually apply it to your life and your work. This is our 14th day of the program so far, and I've spoken with 14 leaders in 14 days, some more than one per day, sometimes it's just me. And here's what I've learned so far. Number one, problem solving constantly is exhausting. This came courtesy of my friend Holly Woodbury, who's brilliant in many ways. Second thing is routines and rituals are a way of establishing control in your life, even when things feel out of control. So this kind of gives you a sense of cadence. This gives you a sense of choice and a sense of certainty in uncertain times. Third thing is resilience is a team sport. This comes from my conversation with Corey Davis from Maven Leadership Collective. When we are adapting and welcoming new ways and supporting each other along the way, we all win. Also, creating diverse organizational cultures and creating a sense that you can actually bring your whole self to work is a way that everyone benefits in the long run. Also, do your census, super important, super important. Know things that are up, we know things are up in the air right now with the whole census and everything, but please be counted. Okay, also, number 4, focusing on now is a way to stay calm and get things done. It's a way to kind of balance your yin, which is more of your resting, rejuvenating self-care, with the yang, which is more about like structure and order and action. And flexibility and patience are the new normal. So in any situation, you can choose to respond with generosity and kindness, or you can go for fear and panic. So we came up with some tools to help you manage this, and those will all be up on the website shortly. We've also learned a lot about grants. We spoke to Pioneer Winter, we spoke to Joe Landini. I did a whole session yesterday about grants and best practices. And hopefully that will be very helpful. I'm sure we'll be talking more about grants and other things as things come up. We've also learned about how artists are being successful, many of them in new ways and perhaps surprising ways, against the odds in raising money. So for instance, we had Amanda Kreider on Monday, and she was sharing with us how she had already committed to pay her artists. There are a couple of organizations that have decided to do this, even though they've been required to either postpone or cancel their events. So she actually was telling us about a series of online performances that they are hosting. I believe the next one is this evening, to help raise money for the artists individually that are going to be paid whether or not the money is raised. But they're $5 to join, and it's a great opportunity to get into supporting a local organization that is supporting artists. So really encourage you to go for that. Also, when everything is off the table, everything is really on the table. So when we're forced to rethink things and be creative, often this means that we get a chance that we might not have otherwise to look at how we're doing things and question whether we might actually have an opportunity to do something that we weren't doing before. One of my clients up in Miami Lakes had wanted to do online classes for a long time. Their performing arts organization that doesn't just focus on the arts, but they focus on creating values-driven people. So they have a lot of discipline and they're very heart-centered. So they actually have come through this having a brand new program, which is online classes. And they're using this opportunity to not only pilot that, but take the great high quality programming that they're already doing, they're actually cataloging it on Google Classroom. I think they're using Google Classroom. And so they're allowing their students to also keep moving forward with their assignments, which they're checking, because they are assuming that they're going to come together and do a performance later. So this is allowing them to say, hey, this wasn't on the table, but now it's on the table. And actually they have launched their fundraising campaign. They haven't done one before. So this has also given them a chance to hyperstart that, to jumpstart that. And what they've decided to do, again, this is about like living their values in this time of crisis, this time of uncertainty. This fundraiser, they launched on the side, not required, but they pretty much said, we're not going to post any charges in the month of April. If your students still want to be involved, that's totally fine. In fact, why don't you welcome more people to be part of what we're doing? You can access all the classes for free. But if you want to, here's a link to a GoFundMe page where your donations will be accepted. If you have the means and you believe in what we're doing, help us. And they've already, I think on their first day, they already raised $2,000. So when we start to talk about lack in uncertainty, sometimes that's not actually what is possible. And I've been talking with a lot of other entrepreneurs about whether it makes sense to charge right now or whether it makes sense to sell. And people need things at all times, and we need arts and creativity more than ever. So think about what might be on the table in terms of service and what might be on the table in terms of programs that you've always wanted to do, or an idea that you had that now you can't really go wrong if you experiment. And if you launch a fundraising platform, fundraising campaign, what's the worst that could happen? You don't get the money that you didn't think you were going to be asking for anyway. So this is really a time to create and to be experimental with some of the ways of doing things. I'm really proud of all the groups that are adapting. It takes incredible courage and incredible strength to be able to say, well, we don't know, but we're going to pivot. And I applaud all of the leaders that are adapting what they're doing, from Michelle Hausman. He's going to be coming on soon to talk about going more on the focus on their education program other than live theater, because it's a very different thing, all the way to New World Symphony that is now offering live from our living room concerts with the fellows online. I think they do them on Facebook Live. So there are a bunch of people looking at this as opportunity minded. And this to me just uplifts my heart so much, because it's so much what the creative community is about. We are creative, which means that in times of stress, we get creative. And I'm just so proud of everybody. Also, purpose is more important than ever. So this is a great, and any inflection point is a great time to say like, well, what is this all for? And number one, like we were just saying, are there additional opportunities that we haven't been taking advantage of, or are there things that no longer serve us? And this is the harder thing. We're going to talk a little bit about business plans today, so we will get into that. We have also talked about how you communicate, especially in times of crisis. So what you do now really will make an impact on how your brand, how your mission, how your work is perceived. So the client I talked about that just said, you know, we don't know what's going to happen, but for this month, we are going to bet that we're going to be coming back stronger than ever at the end of this. And so for a month, we're just going to offer our programs for free. They've decided to pay it forward and to be generous. And they're betting that that is going to be a winning thing, not only for the being able to continue to serve their students, but also that helps people see that they are living their values of creating people of value, values empowered youth. And also, going back to my conversation with Mark Fest last week, we often fail to communicate what we do in a way that people who are not in it can understand, because it's obvious to us and we don't think it needs to be explained. But for people to really be on board with you, it's really important to communicate in a way that they can understand, which is not necessarily the big words and the jargon that we use in grant proposals and in other places like our website. When you're creating a website, it's very different from talking to a human being. So, all right. So Mark gave us actually 9 steps to talk about and create a communications framework for an elevator pitch or for basic communications about what you do. So check that out. And actually this morning I was doing one of my own rituals, which is my daily run. And my run is one of my routines that I use as a set point and a place where I come up with, where I receive inspiration. I don't know that I'm coming up with anything. It's just like my brain starts to think about one thing and then it kind of connects with another thing. And then all of a sudden I have a cohesive thought. And this is very much for me what it was like to be in the practice room, to be a musician. You have an idea and then you go down a rabbit hole and then another thing comes up and then you keep following it. It seems like it's going nowhere. And then all of a sudden you have a catalytic thought, a thought that just crystallizes things in your mind. So this morning I had one of those, and it was really that being a creative person has actually got 3 parts to it. So first part, process and structure. So you have a way, a framework through which you move through the normal, you move through the boundaries, you kind of get into a place where you can start to create. If you don't have a way to enter that, you're going to be challenged. And this is where, when business leaders talk about your first 33 ideas are bad, like that's part of the process. You need a process to be able to skip through, know that you have 33 bad ideas so that you can get to the 34th. And that's what warm-ups are, or like when you're a theater artist, they do a lot of warm-ups and games. So there's an element of play in that. So know what your process is to get into that so that you can get to the fun stuff, get to the juicy stuff. So the second part of being a creative person is more intuition and flow. And this is when Patty Swow was talking to us about the yin and the yang energies. Yin is very like movable. Yin is very, I'm going to rest, I'm going to rejuvenate, I'm going to restore. Yang energy is more like action and logic, and it's action oriented. So intuition and flow is part of, so we talked about structure and process, which is more of the yang, right? You also need the intuitive and the flow. So once you get into that zone where you can really create, that's where the flow comes. That's where the yin energy comes. So you really need both to be a creative person. You have to be able to follow your inner voice and say, like, I don't know why, it's not a rational thing to practice in a certain way or to paint in a certain way. You just get into it and you start to kind of erase yourself and your ego and get into the juiciness of what you're creating. So that's responding to feelings. That's often moving through feelings. That is working from your heart center, whatever it happens to be. So 2 parts to being a creative person. The third part is mindset. And so your mindset is not just doing the work and expecting that it's kind of outside of you, but the mindset is what it takes to do the work of doing the work. So it's a little more meta, it's a little more abstract. It's what you really need to stay the course in doing the work. So in the martial arts, it would be like your daily practice. It would be pushing through all of the things that are setbacks and being able to be resilient. So mindset is the third part to me that really is necessary to be a successful creative person. So process and structure, intuition and flow, and mindset. If you have any questions or thoughts, I'd love to debate. I'd love your input. I'd love more thoughts on this. So mindset is actually the thing that people don't talk about, especially not in business. So, I mean, if you're talking about Harvard Business School, they've got books and books about mindset, right? But when we talk about business plans, we're never talking about mindset. We're talking about just the structure. And it can't all be structure. It has to be structure, flow, and mindset. So this is kind of like the urban legend, right? There is somewhere, somebody came up with this ridiculous thing that artists are all intuitive and creative and they're not structured and they're not business-like. And then I've heard a lot of business people tell me that they're super structured and super rational, but not creative. This is not true. There are tons of exceptions, and just because it's urban legend doesn't mean it's fact, right? So I want to poke holes at that, but I'm just bringing it up to say there are these stereotypes around who we are. But the third thing is mindset. Everyone has challenges with mindset, especially when we're going through a big challenging time for our whole culture, for our whole globe. So mindset is the part that really should be talked about when we're talking about structures like business plans. But this is what I bring to the table. So I've been an artist, I've been a business person, a strategic planner, and I have spent the last 5 years working on mindset. And this is the secret sauce of why I love doing the work I do, which is helping leaders move through their blocks, helping creatives access process. It's the whole thing, but mindset is always part of what I do. And I was trained in strategic planning, but adding a level of mindset onto the plans that I do is something I now can't live without. And I see how different it is, because it's the difference for me in a culture that is really bought into a plan and that is working it, and a culture that is having the plan sit on the shelf because it's overwhelming and it doesn't really work for the mindset of what it takes to implement a plan. Another thing, creating a plan and implementing the plan are totally different things. And often where people get stuck is on the execution. So let's get to the heart of what we're talking about today, which is business planning. So what is a business plan or strategic plan? To me, they're essentially the same thing, which is how can we be successful on purpose? So this is a way to get creatives, intuitive, more on the intuitive side of things, to get the structure to be successful on purpose. We do find it's common knowledge, what you measure gets managed. So if you're looking at your bounce rate on your emails, that's going to improve. If you're looking at how many of our first-time donors didn't come back the second year, those things tend to be top of mind and tend to be measured more. So this is really about that. Giving structure, putting a time and a date and a person responsible to something. I'm a single business owner myself. I'm a solo entrepreneur. So if I'm not measuring it, it doesn't get managed. If I'm not doing it, it doesn't get done. I have people that I hire for various things, but really it's my job to keep the business moving, which again, to do the work of being a strategic planner or a coach or a consultant is different from what it takes to be the CEO of a small business. And that's where, again, where mindset really plays a factor. So what are you going to measure so that you are managing it? A business and a plan is intended to get you out of the doing, out of the little micro processes that, especially when we're creatives, we get stuck into. So you gotta zoom out and get to the macro level to think about long-term success. Otherwise, it's not gonna get managed. And all you're managing is payroll next week, and you're not managing how do we build a cash reserve for the next crisis. And this is very sadly what we're hearing also. Very few organizations have set themselves up to a place where they're not very vulnerable. And one of the things that you'll want to look at is the percentage of your income that comes from various streams, especially when you're a creative person or you're running a business that is related to creativity. It's like your stock portfolio. If it's all in cash, you're limited. If it's all in stocks, you're limited. If you have a balance of cash and stocks and bonds and other things that are out there, other financial instruments, you have the ability to be a little bit more flexible if the conditions change. So being able to think about your own revenue streams, where are areas that we could be making passive revenue? So I'll get into all of these things, but basically I'm just trying to give you an idea of what you could be looking at as your measures of success. So this gets us out of the micro of what's happening tomorrow, what's happening next week, what's happening in the next hour, and gets us thinking about how is what we are tackling right now, how are our choices right now setting us up for future success? Hope that makes sense. So it's much, much easier, especially when we're creative people, to focus on the micro, on the outcomes, on the process, and not really look beyond that. So we get focused on the art because that's the fun part. That's why we started the business or why we got into doing the creative stuff that we do. But you need a framework for knowing what you're good at, what you're not, and then actually solving the things you're not. And not all of that has to be paid, but you have to have a level of self-awareness because a business plan tackles 4 very basic areas that you need to have no matter what kind of business you're doing. And the part that you're really good at, which is the creative part, the art part, is maybe not the thing that you should always be focused on if you're going to have a successful business. So you need a framework for solving the things that you're not good at or the things you don't like doing. So I don't like doing emails. I love writing emails, but actually putting them into the system is not my favorite thing. So I'm looking at ways that maybe I find somebody to do the things that I'm not super excited to get up in the morning and do. Some organizations have somebody who just loves to raise money. Some hope that their boards will, and their boards don't necessarily know how, but there's still this kind of like expectation and hope that the board will come and save us. But if we're not good at fundraising and we need fundraising, we have to be honest with ourselves so that we can just calmly find a way to solve it. And you'd be surprised how productive your board meetings and other strategy meetings with your team or with your community become when you actually can be honest about the things that you know you need, but maybe you need to work on, or you need a solution. That's another great thing. Like we were saying, resilience happens because we're collecting together our knowledge. So you don't necessarily have to be the one with all of the answers for everything. So what are the elements of the framework? Well, first of all, we're going to look at the why. We talked about the purpose. You know, it's really important to have your purpose because without the purpose, what is it all for? And for me, I don't do business plans that are successful unless there is a why, which is why if you're doing a strategic plan or you're doing a business plan, it's good to have your mission or a statement of purpose, something that you're about, because to start solving all the things about the business without knowing why, for me, just doesn't make sense. And that might be something that people disagree on. And so that's a conversation where it's nice to bring in a facilitator to make sure we understand what these things mean. If you have a mission statement that is very aspirational and kind of a little ambiguous, that's often where you get into trouble. So I facilitated a lot of high stakes conversations where people were ready to quit and people were frustrated. But the thing really is, if you know the why and everybody is clear on the why, it makes all of the decision making so much easier and so much clearer. So the purpose is the why you do what you do. And what does this have to do with the business plan? Well, it helps you make informed choices about what you do not do. I don't know if you've been in an organization or if you're currently in an organization that loves ideas, which is great. But if you don't know what you don't do because your mission is not clear or your purpose is not clear, it's really easy to get off track. And it's kind of like having your eyes closed and being in a big parking lot and just deciding to take half steps sideways. You don't know where you're going to end up and you're getting there very gradually, but you might be way off from where you had intended to be just by making micro small decisions that are adding up to the big picture. So make sure you're clear on what you do not do. This will save a lot of time and a lot of frustration from your staff. I've seen every scale, age, type of organization and the hundreds of organizations I've worked with that just aren't clear on their why, and they don't use their mission as a tool. They don't have that why that everyone understands so that they can say, we don't do this. They're tying themselves in pretzels to get money or to please a donor or something. And it's just, it doesn't fit. And it's punishing to everyone except for the people who are making the decision that don't actually feel the impact of how frustrating it can be. So I would encourage against that. And the clearer your why is, the easier it is to avoid that situation. So if you don't know what you're for, you don't know what you're not for. So you can't use your why as a tool to help you make decisions. You have to know your boundaries. And if it doesn't fit, it's a great way to say, Oh, okay, that's great. Let's look. Does it fit? And you can actually look at your mission and you can have the conversation about that. And if it doesn't fit, you say, you know, that's a great idea. It doesn't fit. We'll put it in the parking lot, or let me call my friend who runs this organization that is a good fit for it. Just because it's a great idea does not mean you have to do it. If it's not aligned with your why, you can rest easy and also have a very clear way to have conversations with people who maybe want you to do something that's a little off, a little half step that way, in a way that protects you and protects the organization. If you're a 501c3 not-for-profit, you're creating the public trust, which means that you have an obligation to do the thing that you were created to do. If you start taking little half steps, and you get totally off, you're actually violating the public trust. And that's a very important responsibility that you and your board cannot take lightly. So pay attention and be very clear on why. This is why it's so important to have a business plan, to have a strategic planning process every 3 to 4 years, just to make sure, because in 3 to 4 years, little steps can mean big departures from mission. But going back to where we started this conversation, this might be a time that we take a leap and we try something out. Also doesn't mean you have to permanently adopt a way of being. This might be a place that you're gonna say, okay, I'm gonna take 1% of this year and we're just gonna experiment as much as we can. That was what Jean Case in her Be Fearless book was recommending. In the crisis, you're doing what you can, but this might also be a good time to reassess, is this what we're about? Is this what we are for? Is this related to our why, either in a surprising good way we couldn't have seen otherwise, or in a way that is like, wow, I didn't realize we were so off. It's great that this helped us shed that thing that is no longer serving us. So when I work with clients on a business plan or on a strategic plan, it always has to start with the why. Because if you get into the what, we're talking about the why, the solutions just aren't focused, they're not potent, and they don't get results. If you don't know why you're managing these numbers, you know, what you measure gets managed. If you don't know why you're making the choices you are, it's really hard to actually be deliberate about how you're going to succeed. And how you're going to succeed is just, the word strategy just is what that's all about. So it's easy to do tactical stuff and to get into that strategy once you're clear on the why. The why is something that is not going to be a overnight thing. The why is not going to be something that is necessarily clear to anybody, but it's got to be clear eventually. And so I advise that you take the time and you invest in looking at the why and making sure it is absolutely clear to everybody who needs to be part of that discussion. Second thing, and I just have 2 minutes to talk about it here. The second element that we start with is, now that we know why we do what we do and what we don't do, what is required in order to be successful? What is required for us to succeed because of the why? So that's where the why is kind of like the governor of the what. So this will be different for everybody, but the one thing everybody needs is capital. So in a business plan or strategic plan, there will definitely be a pot for money, because nobody operates a business without capital, even not for profits. So, but most of us think about money when we think about capital. I've learned from my friend Leanne Buchanan, who's the executive director of Venture Cafe, that financial capital is only one part of the capital. So you also have talent capital, you know, which is like human beings. You have resource capital, network capital, which is like kind of collections of human beings. And then inspiration or idea capital, which is the currency of ideas. So when you want to start on your business plan, you want to look at, why do you exist? What purpose are you fulfilling? And then what is required for you to be successful? That will really help you get clear on the what. And it's the guiding question for any meaningful and successful business plan or strategic plan. So this also makes you look at now. So not what is required in a couple of years from now, or what would be nice to be required, or what would be nice to just magically make. No, this is like what is absolutely required to be successful. If you don't have it, the plan will answer how you get it. If you do have it, the plan will answer how you leverage it or how you make more of it. So it would be good for you to make a list of what is required to be successful. So this concludes the beginning of our session, our two-part series on business and strategic plans. And until then, I just want to underline that this work is nonlinear and it can get very complicated. But the best thing to know is that there are always people out there like me who are willing to talk it through, to support you, to help you map out whatever you need to map out. So next week, I'll finish up this two-part series with part 2, which will go more into what are the actual steps in a framework of a strategic plan or business plan. And you can ask me any questions you have between now and then. And in the meantime, you can hit me up with any questions on Instagram or Facebook, just DM me. You can email me at info@culturedinnovations.com. You can join my email list. I send out a blog with videos, tools, and more. You can subscribe to the new YouTube channel where I'm putting some of these videos. And in the meantime, I just want to thank you for being here with me. It's a pleasure, it's an honor, it's a privilege to be part of the creative community and to serve through this type of platform. So stay creative. I'll see you next time.